Hey, Shalom, Israel, Shalom, happy Sabbath. As always, if I can be heard, please put Khan in the chat and let me know where you're tuning in from.
Shalom.
Hey, Shalom, brother, Shalom. We'll give everybody a few more minutes to file in, then we'll get started. Just bear with us. Sister Wanda, Shalom. Sister Bathia, Shalom. Issacharite Princess, Shalom. Baka Judah, Shalom, brother. Jesse Morris, a Shalom King. Happy Sabbath. Baka, happy Hanukkah, brother. We'll go ahead and get started. So, hey, can you go to the book of Daniel chapter 3 for me really quick? I think it's 3. It may not be. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's Daniel 3. Let me see. Let me see what verse I want you to go to. Actually, I'm sorry. Go to chapter 2 if you don't mind. Daniel chapter 2.
You want me to start from the top?
Yes, please.
Gunner. In the second, this is the book of Daniel, chapter 2 from the top.
Okay.
In the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Then the king commanded to call the magicians and the astrologers and sorcerers and the Chaldeans for to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. And the king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king of Syriac, O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream and we will show the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me. If ye will not make known unto me the dream with the interpretation thereof, ye shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill.
Right. So he said, this thing is gone from me, meaning like he, obviously he really couldn't remember the dream like that. Right. But as we read on, we're going to see that Daniel was given the interpretation of this dream. Right. So jump down to verse 17.
Book of Daniel, chapter 2, verse 17. Then Daniel went to his house and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they would desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changeth the times and seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings.
Mm-hmm.
He giveth wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. He revealeth the deep and secret things. He knoweth what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth within him. I thank thee and praise thee, O thy God of my fathers, who has given me wisdom and might.
Jump to verse 25.
Verse
We're not going to
25.
go over this. We're not going to go over the whole thing. We're just going to kind of breeze through really quick.
God.
A higher point to get to.
Verse 25. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah, that will make known unto the king the interpretation. The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Bethshazar, art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen, and the interpretation thereof? Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king have demanded could not the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king. But
so nobody within the wisdom office of the king, right, could expound on this dream. When I say the wisdom office, I mean, these various kings had their soothsayers and their astrologers and their magicians and all these various type of people that were supposed to display this divine wisdom. All the kings of the earth had these type of people, right? And they couldn't expound on this. But watch what happens. Go ahead.
Verse 28. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and the visions of thy head upon thy bed are these.
Jump to verse 31.
Verse 31. Thou, O king, sawest and behold a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
This image's head was of fine gold.
Go ahead.
His breast and his arms of silver.
Mm-hmm.
His belly and his thighs of brass.
Uh-huh.
His legs of iron. His feet, part of iron and part of clay.
Right. So this is a great image that was revealed unto Daniel, right? Concerning this dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. And we're going to jump to verse 36, and let's see what Daniel says about this image, right? Because we're not going to deal with this whole image right now. We're gonna deal with two particular kingdoms in this image to bring out this lesson, right? So go ahead.
Daniel 2, verse 36. This is the dream. and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king.
Mm-hmm.
Thou, O king, art a king of kings.
Mm-hmm.
For the God of heaven have given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of heaven have he given into thine hand,
Mm-hmm.
have made thee ruler over them all. Thou art his head of gold. And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron.
Stop right there. So what we're gonna deal with is this kingdom. It says another kingdom inferior to thee, and the third kingdom of brass, right, which shall bear rule over all the earth. So we have the head of gold, and then we have the silver. No, I'm sorry. Then we have the brass. No, we have the silver. Then we have the brass. All gold is the finest. Then you have silver, and then so on and so forth, right? But while gold is the best, it's not necessarily the strongest, right? So we're gonna deal with brass and silver, but to do that, jump to Daniel 7 real quick. Daniel 7 and start at verse 4, right?
The book of Daniel, chapter 7, verse 4. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made stand upon the feet as a man.
Mm-hmm.
A man's heart was given to it.
Go ahead.
And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. Verse 6. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it.
Okay, stop right there. So the brass and the silver, also the same thing as the bear with the 3 ribs and the leopard, right? So as the brother, I think Vodka Judah said, he said happy Hanukkah, right? And so otherwise known as Feast of Dedication or the rededication, right? Because that's what Hanukkah is. It's a rededication. And so many brothers in Israel, they neglect to honor this because it's not listed in Leviticus 23. And what we must realize is that in the book of Leviticus 23, we were a very, very young nation at the time. And so those high holy days that were given there, those high holy days that were given there were given for that particular time, right? And those Leviticus 23 is where we find our holy convocations and our high holy days. But we also have memorials and feast days, right? And that's what Feast of Dedication is. It is a memorial. It's a celebration, right? Because when you go back to First Kings, First Chronicles, those time periods, right? When the temple was first built, we dedicated the temple. King Solomon, you can go read this on your own time in the book of First and Second Chronicles. The temple was dedicated for 7 days, right? And so what happens after that, we enjoy a time of peace up until the Assyrians and the Babylonians take both houses of Israel, right? The northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And when the southern kingdom is destroyed, so is the temple. And so when Zerubbabel and the priests go back to rebuilt the temple, they dedicated again. You know, there's a kind of a feast of dedication for the temple, right? And so, real quick, go to John chapter 10 and verse 22 out of 1.
Book of John, chapter 10, and verse 22. And it was at Jerusalem, the feast of dedication, and it was winter. And Jesus walked into the temple in Solomon's porch.
Right. So this is Christ attending the memorial, the feast day of Feast of Dedication, right? But we got to back up a little bit because, you know, again, this is for the edification of our brothers and sisters who don't understand what this is, right? And so going back to Daniel 7, that bear that raised itself on one side. That's the Medo-Persian Empire, right? Because at one time the Medes were more exalted than the Persians were. And when it says there are 3 ribs in the mouth of this bear, right? What does that signify? It signifies that this bear has devoured something. And so those 3 ribs in the mouth of the bear represent the nations of, in no particular order, I'm just giving them. They represent the nations of Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt. Because those are the nations that the Medo-Persian Empire conquered to come into power. And it's very fascinating how they beat the Egyptians. If you ever have some time, we probably touch on it in Daniel 11 in some classes down the line, but the Egyptians lost. You know, it wasn't even really a fight. You know, the Egyptians lost because the Medo-Persian Empire had the presence of mind to use cats in the war. And so, you know, the Egyptians have an affinity for cats. So they were, you know, they used those cats to, you know, like I said, win that war. And so then we get down to this leopard, right? And this leopard with this, with the 4 heads, that represents the Greeks, right? The Greeks and Alexander and his generals. And we're going to touch on that more in chapter 8. But we have to understand that this Bible is a book of war, right? It's a history book, but it's also a book of war. Because that's all we see in the so-called Old Testament is war, conquering. We see captivity, right? And so our history is broken down into captivities, you know, 7 major captivities. And when you get to the so-called New Testament, where are we at? We're in the time of the Caesars, right? And that's the Greco-Roman Empire. But before we get to the Greco-Roman Empire, we have to understand what took place before that. Because when you read it in the New Testament, everything we read is convoluted unless we're reading the history prior to it and we have an understanding. Paul says there's no Jew or no Greek, right? What is he talking about? Because obviously there's more than Jews and Greeks on the earth. But why is he simply saying there's no Jew nor Greek? There's a reason he's saying these things. And for our people, you know, some brothers and sisters don't subscribe to the history before. You know, we have brothers and sisters in Christianity, Catholicism, you know, all these various places. They look at Greeks as Greek Edomites. That's what they look at it as, all the while ignoring the history behind why these Israelites are being called Greeks. And a lot of our people see these things on a daily basis right in front of their face, why our people are being called Greeks, because they know people that are called Greeks. We have a gang of people amongst our people right now, Blacks and Hispanics, that call themselves Greeks. And a lot of it goes back to this time period we're about to read about. So go to the book of Daniel chapter 8, because this is where we have to get understanding about Hanukkah, right? This is where it starts. Start at Daniel chapter 8. You can start at verse 2.
God, this is the book of Daniel, chapter 8, verse 2. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had two horns. And the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last.
See that one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last, because again, when he saw it as the bear, it was the Medo-Persian Empire. The Medes were more exalted. But now, with these two horns, the higher came up last. Now it's become the Persians and the Medes. Two different bloodlines coming together for one kingdom. But now, the higher horn is the Persians, because they become more exalted than the Medes. Instead of the Medo-Persian Empire, now it's the Persians and the Medes, right? So go ahead, verse 4.
I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will and became great. Verse 5. And as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground.
Okay, so as he's considering these horns, all of a sudden, a he-goat, right? A he-goat comes. Now go ahead, read.
And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had two horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran into him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his two horns.
Right, so this he-goat was moved with anger towards this ram, right? Go ahead.
And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him. And there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand.
Right. So when you read about this ram and this he-goat, right? This he-goat is Alexander the Greek. And you can read about his conquering in the scriptures. You know, it's all Zechariah, Ezekiel, here in Daniel. It talks about the conquering of this of Alexander the Free, right? They call him the Great, but we call him the Free. When you read about Alexander, and you read about the things he was into, how he died, like he was just, just a nasty bastard, man. Pardon my Hebrew, but he was. And so, but outside of that, when you mention a lot of these New Age dictators or leaders that have done detrimental things on the earth to people, right? They never mention his name. They never mention some of these so-called European. There's one they mention all the time. We know who he is, but that's because he was killing so-called whites. But when you deal with some of these earlier ones that were, killing darker skinned people, they don't really care about that, right? But Alexander, he really went in with his conquering. He's the first of his kind to fulfill the blessing given to his forefather in the book of Genesis, right? And so read verse 8 for me.
Book of Daniel, chapter 8, verse 8. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven.
Right, four notable ones towards the four winds of heaven. At his height, at his strength, he was broken, right? This is Alexander. He was very young, but he like I said, he did a lot of conquering, and we're going to read about that. And it says four notable ones towards the four winds of heaven. And so in order to understand what we're reading, we got to jump in and out of time, right? Like the scriptures do. Prophecy does that. Sometimes when you're reading about prophecy and the fulfillment of it, you got to go kind of jump back and forth, right? So read verse 9 again, real quick.
Daniel chapter 8, verse 9. And out of one of them came forth a
verse 8 and 9 together, Salakia.
Okay. Daniel chapter 8, verse 8. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great. When he was strong, the great horn was broken. And for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven.
Right, four notable ones towards the four winds of heaven, right? These four notable ones, they're dealing with Alexander's generals. And I'll just give you guys the name. General Cassander, he was given Macedonia. General Lysimachus was given Thrace and Asia Minor. General Seleucus was given Syria. And General Ptolemy was given Egypt. And if it be the will of the Most High, we could do a breakdown of Daniel 11. And it's going to show you just how crazy, Esau was getting down with each other. There's a such thing called the Peloponnesian Wars. You can look those up. Esau warring with each other like crazy. But then you have the Ptolemies, versus the Seleucid Empire, right? Syria versus Egypt. And they was getting down, man. It was going in. But read verse 9 again for me, because this is where it gets heavy for us, right?
God, this is Daniel chapter 8, verse 9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great, toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land.
Right. He waxed exceedingly great, right? And this is Antiochus Epiphanes, right? Go to the book of First Maccabees, chapter 1. First Maccabees, chapter 1. Start at verse 1.
The book of First Maccabees, chapter 1. And it happened after that, Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chetam, has smitten Darius, the king of Persians and Medes. That he reigned.
That's the he-goat. Go ahead.
That he reigned in his stead, the first over Greece, and made many wars, and won many strongholds, and slew the kings of the earth, and went through to the ends of the earth, and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him. Whereupon he was exalted, and his heart was lifted up.
Now watch this. I'm going to read this real quick in the book of Genesis chapter 27, right? The beginning, right? It's said in the beginning. Genesis chapter 27, start at verse 40. No, I'm going to start at verse 38. And Esau said unto his father, hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth and of the dew of the heaven above. Fatness means riches. Dew, when he says dew of the heaven, the dew falls everywhere. When you wake up in the morning to go outside, there's dew on the grass, on the rooftop, wherever, dew is. That's just the way the earth was watered before rain, the dew, right? And then it says, verse 40, and by thy sword shalt thou live, And so that's Esau's blessing, right? That he would live by the sword, and he would get rich lands by conquering, right? And so that's what we have here with Alexander. It said, in so much that the earth was quiet before him, and his heart was lifted up. Go ahead, verse 4.
And he gathered a mighty strong host, and ruled over countries and nations and kings, who became tributaries unto him. And after these things he fell sick, and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable, and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died. And his servants bare rule, every one in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years. And evils were multiplied in the earth.
You see that evils were multiplied in the earth, right? Why are evils multiplied in the earth? Because when this man bears rule, right? Let's get that in Proverbs really quick. Proverbs chapter, is it 21, brother? Let me see. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. Proverbs 28. No. I'm sorry. Proverbs 29 and 2.
God, this is the book of Proverbs, chapter 29, verse 2. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked bear rule, the people mourn.
Right. Read that again.
Proverbs, chapter 28, chapter 29, verse 2. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn.
See that? So it says evils were multiplied in the earth. Right. So go ahead, read verse 10.
And also you got to point out this is somewhat the beginning of the Edomite rulership on the earth.
Absolutely.
Verse 10. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been a hostage in Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks.
Right. So real quick, right, where it says he had been in hostage at Rome, because this is what the Romans would do, right? As part of peace treaties with them, they would tell you, hey, give me someone in line of succession, or give me a couple of your children to grow up here in Rome. They would do that so that you wouldn't have like a strong-willed heir or something like that would later on down the line rise up and try to take power. And so Antiochus Epiphanes, he was one of them, right? And when you read about this, it's a lot of heavy history that goes in. It's a lot, years and years of history. But when you read about it, Antiochus, he was a charlatan. Like he played a lot of tricks. He's like a Donald Trump of the time. You know what I'm saying? Like he played a lot of tricks, man, to get himself into power. But he eventually got into power. And he wasn't very successful. And one thing that he would do is he would go on these campaigns, and when he would get thrashed, when he would get beaten, the first thing he would do is like the scriptures say, and towards the pleasant land, which is Israel, he would go into Israel and go crazy. He would start murdering us, plundering us, different things like that. It was a cycle for him. He'd go out to war, he'd lose, or the Romans would stop him. And then he would go back to Israel and he would kill, and plunder and do all sorts of crazy stuff, right? So go ahead, verse 11.
In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So this device pleased them well.
So here we go. We got to pay attention. Let me grab my dictionary really quick. I'm sorry. Read verse 11 again for me, brother.
First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 11. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow.
Right. So
Christ pleased them well.
So this is the beginning of what is known as Hellenism, right? Or Hellen. You know, these Israelites were known as Hellenists. And so you can see it. Let me put it up there. Maybe you can see it. Hellenists. It says Jews who made Greek their tongue, and with it often adopted Greek. What does that say? Let me see. Often adopted Greek ideas and practices. So that's Hellenism is like, you know, it was a cultural phenomenon of the time, right? Because our people laid hold to it in so much that it still goes on to this day.
That's kind of like
a lot of things.
That's kind of like being if back then they were Hellenized, now it's kind of like being Americanized, isn't it? Celebrate 4th of July and wearing American flags and pouring out in droves to vote for someone to rule over you.
And see, the thing is, right? The thing with Hellenism is you would look at Hellenism as like one of the first ideologies to come up on the earth, right? Like that, because Esau started bringing all sorts of ideology after that, right? Because throughout process of time, you start seeing various Edomite kingdoms have their own type of ideology, right? But the one that you still see that's extremely prevalent to this day is Hellenism, because it introduced what? It introduced sports. You know what I'm saying? Like among the Greeks, they had like secret societies. You see that now. So all these things are prevalent. And you know, Jake loved to lay hold to stuff like that, man. You know, whatever Esau do, or you know, these nations do, Jake is gonna be the first in line, and they're gonna take it above and beyond. And that's what our people do, right? Real quick, go to no, we'll get that later. I don't want to spoil it. So go to First Maccabees chapter 6, verse 16. Read verse 16 real quick.
First Maccabees chapter 6.
Actually, I'm sorry, brother. You could just read down from 13 on down. Just go ahead and do that.
Gone. First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 13. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen.
After the ordinances of the heathen, right? They went to the king, the nobles. Hey, we want to do what they doing, right? Go ahead, read.
Verse 14. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem, according to the customs of the heathen.
According to the customs of the heathen, a place of exercise, right? What is that known as? Later on in the scriptures, it tells us it's known as a gymnasium, which means to exercise naked. So when you hear in Babylon, you going to the gym and you like, damn, that sister got some tights on, like showing everything. She got a sports bra on. Damn, Jake in here, man, with no shirt on. Like, and nowadays, because everybody feels so liberated, You damn near going into the gym seeing everybody naked because it goes back to that. That's what it goes back to.
And I'm gonna tell you,
Go ahead.
I used to work when I used to frequent the gym a lot, man. You know, Edomites, man. When you in the locker room, they come out of the shower with the towel on their shoulder, bro.
Yeah, good.
And want to stand there and hold conversation.
Yeah.
You know, that was very, very comfortable for them. You know, going into the sauna and just sitting there amongst one another. And, you know, they come in, I get up, I gotta go. You know, I didn't even shower at the gym. I put my hoodie on and go home.
Right.
Because it was too comfortable with that.
Right. And if you just right, I got this from I watched this show, man, on Netflix called Last Chance University. And one of the basketball coaches on there, he said, basically everything can be solved with just a jump stop, right? In basketball, there's a certain move with jump stop. And so I'm like, man, just jump stop for a second. And just think, if our people would just do that, think about it. Like, there's no other reason on the face of the earth as to why you would go to the gym and be naked, like working out half naked. There's no other reason. There's no rhyme or reason to it outside of these nasty Greeks, man. And they're the ones that started it. You know why? Because they're so used to living lascivious lifestyles. That's what they're about. That's why when you get to Paul, you know, we read about this last week. Paul was like, look, if I didn't have the commandment, I wouldn't know about all sorts of concupiscence and all these different things I was dealing with. Because that's what the Greco-Romans did, man. That's how they were. Hey, Ariola, Joy, Shalom. I think that brother's watching the live just like you are. If I had to guess, I would say that's what he's doing, sister. Happy Sabbath to you, by the way. Happy Hanukkah. And so there's no rhyme or reason to it outside of the fact that this is what they brought forth. And Israel took it to a whole new level because read verse 14 again.
First Maccabees chapter 1 verse 14. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem, according to the customs of the heathen.
Go ahead.
And made themselves uncircumcised.
Go ahead.
And forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves to the heathen and were sold to do mischief.
Now, this is how Israel takes it to a whole nother level, right? Because not only do they agree to forsake the covenant, right? And go to the king and say, hey, let us, you know what I'm saying? Let us have a place of exercise. But it said they made themselves uncircumcised. So they were literally having procedures to recircumcise themselves, like, you know, so they would look uncircumcised. And they would go around in the gym naked so that they can be seen. Yo, I'm really a Greek, my man. It's like, I'm a Greek. This is me. Look at me. Like, bugged out, wicked as hell. Because that's how Israel is. We get carried away with these heathen customs. So for some of us, we gonna fight and we gonna stand tall. But for the majority of our people, Eve and Jake, man and woman, they don't care. They with it. That's why you see so-called St. Patrick's Day. And Eve dyed, Jake, he done dyed his beard green. Eve got a green weave in her head. Jake messed around and got green and gold. You know what I'm saying? Teeth in his mouth. He didn't come out with he didn't came just for the special occasion. He didn't got the green candy paint on his car. Like, they going all out for these heathen days. And it started here with that spirit right there in verse 11, right? So go ahead, verse 16.
Now, when the kingdom was established before Antiochus, he thought to reign over Egypt, that he might have the dominion of 2 realms. Wherefore he entered into Egypt with great multitude, with chariots and elephants and horsemen, and a great navy, and made war against Ptolemy, the king of Egypt. But Ptolemy was afraid of him and fled, and many were wounded to death. Thus they got the strong cities in the land of Egypt, and he took the spoils thereof.
Yeah, man. Because listen, he was very, very ambitious. Not only was he very ambitious, but he was very, very persistent, right? I don't know if y'all watch Game of Thrones, but he's like Littlefinger. That's how Antiochus Epiphanes was. Very, very persistent and very, very ambitious, and was willing to do anything for power, right? So let's go back to the book of Daniel, chapter 8. Again, this history right here, First and Second Maccabees, is a lot of history, a lot, right? Daniel 8 and Daniel 11, a lot of history. Daniel 8 and 11 coincide with, what we read in First and Second Maccabees, right? Going in and out of time. It's like it goes into a lot of history. It couldn't be covered in just these two books, right? It's just so much that goes on, especially when you have the Egyptian and Syrian wars. Like it goes down. It's like it goes on for like different, one would die, then the sun will rise up. It goes on, man. I think there's like Antiochus Epiphanes. I think I don't even know if he's the first. Like there's like 10 of them, right? And the scripture just said they're just going to use the name Antiochus, but you have to have studied history to even understand which one it is, right? So let's go back to Daniel.
Book of Daniel, chapter 8.
Read verse 9 again.
And verse 9. Okay. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land.
Right. So we just read about he extended his rule over the south, which is Egypt. And then when we deal with the east, that's Elamias and Armenia, right? And then it says in the pleasant land. We all know the pleasant land, that's Israel, right? And we're gonna get that. We're gonna get verse 10.
Verse 10. And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. Right.
So the host of heaven, what is that? That's Israel. When you read the book of Exodus, chapter 12 and verse 41, right? That's the host of heaven, the Israelites. And when it says he cast many down to the ground, right? He indoctrinated them with philosophies, man. And with their ideology. That's what happens in war. You either take hold to our philosophy, our political rule, and what we got going on, or it's a wrap for you. And that's how Esau operates. Everywhere he goes, the people are worse off because of him, because of his democracy, because of his so-called democratic republic. Right? Esau has had all sorts of philosophies, man. You had communism with what is it? The USSR, the Soviet Union. Then you had Nazism. Then you have his Democratic Republic. All these different ideologies, man. And so that's what happened with the Israelites. And again, like our people, a lot of our people, that's why the Lord said, in Second Ezra, that this world to come is for few, man. It's for few. That's why when you hear, I used to hear the, Zion could, bear record to this. Our old school elders, man, they used to say, man, I ain't got to do nothing but stay black and die. You know what I'm saying? Like, look, all I got to do is keep the commandments and live, right? That's it, man. Through the spirit of Christ, right? With that faith in Yahweh Shai, man. Because this world to come is not for many, man. That's why I be telling brothers like, yo, when you out teaching or you expounding on the word and stuff like that, and Jake don't want to get it, don't take it personal. Don't take it personal. Because our people are just wicked, man. Even some of us in the faith, we deal with wickedness. There's just something inside of us that says, hey, you need to repent. And that spirit stirs up within us. But Jake don't want to get it, man. Hey, look, all right, brother. You know, hopefully you get it in time. You know, because the majority of our people are First Maccabees 1 and 11, man. Right now. Right now. That's what they are. And so, you know, we love our people, we pray for them, and we try to get them out of that thinking. But at the same time, don't take it personal. All right. So, go ahead, Daniel 8 and 11.
Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down, and an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression. And it cast down the truth to the ground. And
okay, read verse 8 and 11 again for me, Salakia.
Daniel chapter 8, verse 11. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Verse 12.
So this wicked Edomite, man, he magnified himself even to the Most High, right? And he ended the daily sacrifice. He ended it. And this is on a very, very I don't need, but when I say carnal or fleshly, I don't mean it in a bad way. I mean like he physically stopped the daily sacrifice. Right? Because there's going to come a time in the spirit they're going to try to do that to us. We don't have no temple, but we are the temple. And they're going to try to stop us from our daily sacrifice to the Lord, because we make ourselves a living sacrifice, right? Unto the Most High by denying ourselves, right? And they're going to try to stop that. But here, this is a very real thing. We had a real temple and he stopped it, right? So go ahead, verse 12.
Verse 12. And a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered.
Right, sin, practice, and prosper, because this host that was given to him were wicked Israelites that we read about in First Maccabees 1 and 11. That was the host that was given unto him. And when you read about Israel, man, like, man, our people rebellious as hell. They wicked. You know, they operated like in treachery. It was crazy, man. So go ahead, verse 13.
Daniel chapter 8, verse 13. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto the certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot?
Right. Now, here's the thing. We read about transgression of desolation, right? Abomination of desolation. We read about this more than a couple times in the scriptures, because this transgression that maketh desolate, or this abomination of desolation, this isn't just one event. That takes place and is going to take place. It's not just a one-off, right? It's not just a one-off. So let's go back to First Maccabees and let's read what we just read in Daniel. Let's read the fulfillment of it, right? First Maccabees chapter 1, and verse start at verse 33. No, I'm sorry. Start at verse 36. Start there.
The book of First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 36. for it was a place to lie in wait against the sanctuary and an evil adversary to Israel. Thus they shed innocent blood on every side of the sanctuary and defiled it. And so much that the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled because of them.
Desolation, right? The transgression that make it desolate, right? Go ahead. And we're going to read about this transgression that happened. Go ahead.
Whereupon the city was made a habitation of strangers and became strange to those that were born in her.
You see that?
Her own children left her.
You see that? It said, and became strange to those that were born in her, and her own children left her, right? And I always use I always use a scene that I saw on the show that the brother Tracy Morgan had, and I always forget the name of the brother's show, right? But he went to prison, right? And then he last OG, right?
That's OG, kind of.
Right. He went to prison, and then he gets out of prison. He comes back to Brooklyn, and he's looking around like, and he's seeing Edomite. He's seeing white folks in Brooklyn, right? You know, he like, what the hell is this, right? Like I remember I saw a video a couple years back, right, of a white girl in front of Marcy Projects doing the Harlem Shake and like all sorts of crazy dances, and it's just like, wow, like that's gentrification, man. And it goes on in all of our neighborhoods, how they gentrify us. And so you were born there, and then you might go off to college or something, or you might move, and then you coming back to visit, and you like, yo, what is going on in my neighborhood? Perfect example. Like I went to my mom, she just got a house built. You know, her all praise to the Most High. Her house was rebuilt in AOCHouston, you know, here in Houston. And you can read about AOCHouston, man. It's AOCHouston is Israel. You know, it's like it's the hood, but you know, that's where our people are from. And our people own a lot of land there, right? They owned a lot of land there, right? And so because my mom's house was being built and she lived somewhere else, this is like years in the making. So I hadn't been there, right? So, you know, I'm going down. You guys may not know these streets, but there's brothers and sisters from Houston that may know. Going down Ella, get off, you know, off 16, going down Ella. And I'm starting to see as I'm getting into AOCHouston, I'm like, yo, I passed Pinemont, and I'm like, yo, like, what is all this stuff being built here? Make a right on Wilberforce. And as I go down Wilberforce, I get to West Montgomery to make a left, and I see a Family Dollar. I'm like, yo, what the hell is this? And so it's just all sort, you know, then I make a right, make a left on West Montgomery, make a right on Radcliffe. And I'm like, whoa, where these houses come from? And so it's like, they're gentrifying our neighborhoods. They come in and they use wicked practices to get our people out and to take our people's land. And here, where we read about it, you know, they did it through war and bloodshed. But now they do it cunningly. They do it in a cunning type of way, right? And so that's what we see in here. This is very poetic. Like her children that were born in her, Jerusalem. Like they don't recognize it, right? So go ahead, verse 39.
Verse 39. Her sanctuary was laid waste like a wilderness. Her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into reproach, her honor into contempt.
Go ahead.
As had been her glory, so was her dishonor increased, and her excellency was turned into mourning. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom.
Here we go.
All should be one people,
and
every one should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king.
All the heathen agreed, right? But watch what happens. Go ahead.
Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion. and sacrifice unto idols and profane the Sabbaths.
You see that? Many Israelites did what?
Many Israelites consented to his religion and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath.
Right. So this is why when you get some of these Bible dictionaries, a lot of these so-called scholars and the people, the Zondervan, they don't even believe. They're not even so-called believers. But watch what they say when we deal with the term Gentile, right? So again, I'm gonna put this up to the screen so everybody can see. Gentile, heathen, stranger, they're all interchangeable. And it says, usually it means a non-Israelite people. That's what Gentile means, or heathen. Usually it means a non-Israelite people. Why does it usually mean that? Because the Gentiles, Israelites also became the Gentiles. And this is where it starts for the southern kingdom. It starts here because the northern kingdom, when you read Hosea, the northern kingdom, Hosea was the last prophet sent to the northern kingdom. And he told them exactly what was going to happen, how they would be a no people, and how they wouldn't be the Lord's people, and how, going back to Jeremiah, how the Lord was going to divorce them because of their fornication, that idolatry they were in, heavy idolatry, right? Even unto this day, the northern kingdom deals heavily in idolatry, right? And so verse 43 said, many of the Israelites also consented to his religion. And it says, sacrifice unto idols and profane the Sabbath. But that's not even the worst thing that took place. Go ahead, verse 44.
First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 44. For the king has sent letters by messengers into Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, that they should follow the strange laws of the land, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days, and pollute the sanctuary and holy people, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and the unclean beasts.
You see that? That's it right there. That's the transgression that make desolate, the abomination of desolation, right? That's it right there. Read verse 47 again.
Set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts.
They sacrifice swine's flesh upon the altar. That's the transgression that make desolate, the abomination of desolation, right? Verse 48.
Verse 48, that they should also leave the children uncircumcised, and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation, to the end they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. And whosoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he said he should die.
He shall die. Let's go back to Daniel chapter 8 and verse 13.
The book of Daniel chapter 8, verse 13. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto the certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, with both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed.
Right. 23. Go ahead. Finish it off. I'm sorry. Oh, that's it. That was it on that. Okay. 2,300 days, right? 171 BC to 165 BC, right? And that's when it would be cleansed, right? Hence we get the Feast of Dedication. So now go to Daniel 11, right? Start at verse 31. And I said we're going to probably get into the whole Daniel 11 another time, but this prophecy picks up at verse 31 in Daniel 11, right? So start there.
The book of Daniel, chapter 11, verse 31. An arm shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate.
You see that? The abomination that maketh desolate, right? So power would stand on Antiochus' part, right? And they would place the desolation and make the abomination and make it desolate. Go ahead, verse 32.
Verse 32, and such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries. But the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits.
Let's get that. First Maccabees chapter 2. The people that know their God shall be strong and do exploits, right? So let's go to the book of Second Maccabees. First Maccabees chapter 2, I'm sorry. First Maccabees chapter 2. And you can start at verse 1.
Yeah. The book of First Maccabees chapter 2, verse 1.
Mm-hmm.
In those days arose Mattathias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, a priest of the son of Jarib from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modin.
Mm-hmm.
And he had 5 sons.
Mm-hmm.
Joanan called Caddis, Simon called Thassi, Judas, who was called Maccabeus, Eleazar called Avaran, and Jonathan, whose surname was Aphis. And when he saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah and Jerusalem, he said, woe is to me, wherefore I was born to see this misery of my people and of the holy city, and to dwell there where it was delivered into the hand of the enemy, and the sanctuary into the hand of strangers. Her temple is become as a man without glory. Her glorious vessels are carried away into captivity. Her infants are slain in the streets. Her young men with swords of the enemy. What nation have not had part in her kingdom and gotten of her spoils?
Right, now jump to verse 19.
Verse 19.
Put that up, Papa.
Then Mattathias answered and spake with a loud voice. Though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him, and fall away every one from the religion of their fathers, and give consent to his commandments, yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers. Most High forbid that we should forsake the law and the ordinances.
So that's each and every one of you, right? That's on the live. That's what you've decided to do, right? Our brothers and sisters that's not on the live in these various schools, right? Yeah, we may have some differences here and there, and you may see arguments arise and different things like that. But, you know, if it be the Lord's will, we put those things to the side, and it's going to happen, right? Our brothers in and out of camps, brothers and sisters, right? Children. Because it wasn't just Judas, his brothers, and his father alone. No, they had a whole nation of people that they had to take care of, right? And you don't just have warriors in a nation. A nation is comprised of various offices. Everybody has to do their part, right? These brothers and their father just chose to stand tall and fight and protect, right? So go ahead, verse 22.
Verse 22. We will not hearken to the king's words to go from our religion, either on the right hand or the left. Now when he had left speaking these words, there came one of the Jews in the sight of all to sacrifice on the altar which was at Modin, according to the king's commandment. Which thing when Mattathias saw, he was inflamed with zeal, and his reins trembled. Neither could he forbear to show his anger according to judgment. Wherefore he ran and slew him upon the altar. Also, the king's commissioner, who compelled men to sacrifice, he killed at that time, and the altar he pulled down.
Right, like in that movie 300, man. And
God.
that dude came to Leonidas and said, "Earth and water." And he started talking that talk, and Leonidas looked around, looked at his wife, looked at his boys, looked at his land. It's like, nah, man, it ain't going down like that. And guess what? He was willing to accept whatever was to come after that. Same thing with Mattathias. When he slew them too, he knew then that he's willing to accept whatever comes after that. Not by his might, but the spirit and power of the Most High.
God.
So go ahead, read.
Verse 26. Thus dealt he zealously for the law of the Most High, like as Phinehas did unto Zambri, the son of Shalom. And Mattathias cried throughout the city with a loud voice, saying, Whosoever is zealous of the law and maintaineth the covenant, let him follow me. So he and his sons fled into the mountains and left all that ever they had in the city.
Go ahead.
Then many that sought after justice and judgment went down into the wilderness to dwell there, both they and their children and their wives and their cattle, because afflictions increased sore upon them.
Jump to verse 42.
Verse 42. Then came there into the company of Assyrians, who were mighty men of Israel, even all such as were voluntarily devoted unto the law.
Zealous ones, right? Go ahead.
Also all they that fled for persecution joined themselves unto them, and were a stay unto them. So they joined their forces and smote sinful men in their anger, and wicked men in their wrath. But the rest fled into the heathen for succor.
Right. The rest of them, they fled to the heathens for help. Right? Because that's how our people do. That's how they do. Look, even brothers that just be out teaching. You have, wicked Jake and Eve that don't like it. So they'll go to the police. They'll go to the nobles and try to get it shut down. And all they doing is reading the Bible. They're gonna try to get it shut down. Like the scripture said, and they hated he that rebuketh at the gate.
You gotta think about this, man. Just reading the story and it's giving you the details of how the people operated and how the Jews operated, the ones that were wicked as well as the ones that stood strong. Man, this can't be nobody but us. This can't be nobody but us, man. When you look at every other culture of all these other nations, the description of the actions that was going on within these chapters, man, it can't be anybody but us. You don't see that type of separation between these heathen nations. They all have different ideologies, but they all come together for the same purpose of survival. We separate and try to throw one another under the bus, and then go to someone else for them just to preserve us and kill off our brothers.
Right.
Verse where am I? I'm at verse 45. Then Mattathias and his friends went round about and pulled down the altars. And what children soever they found within the coast of Israel uncircumcised, those they circumcised valiantly. They pursued also after the proud men, and the work prospered in their hand. So they recovered the law out of the hand of the Gentiles and out of the hand of kings. Neither suffered they the sinners to triumph. Now when the time drew near that Mattathias should die, he said unto his sons, Now have pride and rebuke gotten strength, and the time of destruction and the wrath of indignation. Now therefore, my sons, be ye zealous for the law, and give your lives for the covenant of your fathers.
Go ahead.
Call to remembrance what acts our fathers did in their time. So shall ye receive great honor and an everlasting name.
Right. So Mattathias, their father, he died, right? But like the scripture tells us, man, you got sons, you're not dead. Because you teach your sons to grieve the enemy. And though the father may die, he's left someone behind like unto himself, roughly paraphrasing, right? So let's go back to the book of Daniel, chapter 11. Daniel 11 and verse 33.
Verse 33. And they understand among the people shall instruct many. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many. Yet they shall fall by the sword, and by the flame, by captivity, and by spoil many days.
Mm-hmm.
Now when they shall fall, they shall hopping with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries. And some of them,
now, real quick, right? Because again, we just read that Mattathias, right? That Mattathias ended up dying, right? But this is where, you know what I'm saying, this is where the spirit and power of the Most High comes in at. First Maccabees 3 and verse 1.
book of First Maccabees, chapter 3, verse 1. Then his son Judas, called Maccabeus, rose up in his stead, and all his brethren helped him. And so did all they that held with his father, and they fought with cheerfulness the battle of Israel.
You see that? So there was only one brother that was called Maccabeus, and that was Judah or Judas, right? But they all became known as the Maccabees, but it's because Judah. And the word Maccabee means hammer. And he got that name for how he was in war. Like it felt like, you know, he was hitting you with a hammer, right? And so that's just how you know how bold and brave that brother was, man. One of the greatest generals in our history, right? A great warrior. And when you deal with the Maccabees, right? The Maccabees, unlike King David and the mighty men, they didn't have a lot of, they didn't have large armies, right? And so they kind of had to take it back to what? They have to use a lot of guerrilla warfare tactics, right? A few going against the many. But we all know, like his father said, well, I don't think his father said it, but the battle doesn't stand in the multitude of men. It's the most high. The Most High guided them brothers, right? He guided them to do what they did, right? So let's go back to Daniel chapter 11.
Book of Daniel chapter 11, verse 35. And some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them, and to purge, and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed.
Right. So Judah, he eventually died in battle. Now there's duality to this scripture here, because it's not just dealing with that time, but even a future time to come. Brothers and sisters on the earth now, to try us, right? Because this thing is just on a loop. They had their time when hard times came, and we're going to have ours as well, right? And so Judah finally fell, but when he fell, his brothers rose up, and his brothers' sons will rise up. So go ahead, verse 36.
And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself, and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished.
Right. So this is
that is determined shall be done.
right. So this is dealing with Antiochus Epiphanes, right? Which means God manifest on earth. Blasphemy, man. That's how proud he was. That's how proud this dude was to name himself that. Right? So go ahead. Let's go to First Maccabees chapter 1. No, First Maccabees chapter 4. First Maccabees chapter 4. Let's get into it.
First Maccabees chapter 4. Then
First-
took Gorgias 5,000 footmen and 1,000 of the best horsemen, and removed out of the camp by night, to the end he might rush in upon the camp of the Jews and smite them suddenly. And the men of the fortress were his guides. Now, when Judas heard thereof, he himself removed, and the valiant men with him, that he might smite the king's army which was at Emmaus, while as yet the forces were dispersed from the camp. In the mean season came Gorgias by night into the camp of Judas, and when he found no man there, he sought them in the mountains, for said he, these fellows flee from us.
Right. So it said in the mean season. What is the mean season? That's wintertime. That's the winter. That's the mean season. Right. And so, the mean season, you couldn't have your cattle out. And that's how we know AOCHouston, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus, wasn't born on December 25th. It wasn't born in no wintertime. Because when you read about tax season and the shepherds being in the field and things like that, it couldn't have been that way. They would have froze to death. That's why they call it the mean season. So go ahead, read. Verse 6, I think he was at.
First Maccabees chapter 4, verse 6. But as soon as it was day, Judas showed himself in the plain with 3,000 men, who nevertheless had neither armor nor sword in their minds. Swords to their minds. Let me read that over. Salah. Chapter 4, verse 6. But as soon as it was day, Judas showed himself in the plain with 3,000 men, who nevertheless had neither armor nor swords to their minds. And they saw the camp of the heathen, that it was strong and well harnessed, and compassed round about with horsemen, and these were experts of war. Then said Judas to the men that were with him, fear ye not their multitude, neither be ye afraid of their assault. Remember how our fathers were delivered in the Red Sea, when Pharaoh pursued them with an army. Now therefore let us cry into heavens, if peradventure the Most High will have mercy upon us, and remember the covenant of our fathers, and destroy this host before our face this day. That so all the heathen may know that there is one who delivereth and saveth Israel.
Go ahead.
Then the strangers lifted up their eyes and saw them coming over against them, wherefore they went out of the camp to battle. But they that were with Judas sounded their trumpets. So they joined battle, and the heathen, being discomfited, fled into the plain. Howbeit all the hindmost of them were slain with the sword, for they pursued them unto Gazara, and unto plains of Idumea, and Azotus, and Jamnia, so that there were slain of them upon 3,000 men. This done, Judas returned again with his host from pursuing them, and said to the people, be not greedy of the spoils, inasmuch as there is a battle before us.
You see, he told him, he said, look, don't try to, get fat from the spoils. You know, we still got a whole battle to fight, right? So he keeping them in that warrior mind state, because when you start to spoil, you start to take a spoil from war, you kind of you taking your armor off, and it's like, hey, we done here. You know what I'm saying? Let's get what we can, make ourselves rich, and let's go. But he's telling them, nah, relax. We still got a war before us. Go ahead, read.
Verse 18. And Georgius and his hosts are here by us in the mountain. But stand ye now against our enemies and overcome them. And after this, ye may boldly take the spoils. As Judas was yet speaking these words, there appeared a part of them looking out of the mountain, who, when they perceived that the Jews had put their host to flight and were burning the tents, for the smoke that was seen declared what was done. When therefore they perceived these things, they were sore afraid, and seeing also the host of Judas in the plain ready to fight, they fled every one into the land of strangers. Then Judas returned to spoil the tents, where they got much gold and silver and blue silk and purple of the sea and great riches. After this, they went home and sung a song of thanksgiving and praised the Most High in heaven, because it is good, because his mercy endureth forever.
Go ahead.
Thus Israel had a great deliverance that day. Now all the strangers that had escaped came and told Lysias what had happened, who, when he heard thereof, was confounded and discouraged, because neither such thing as he would have done unto Israel, nor such things as the king commanded him were come to pass.
Right. It failed. The weapons formed, but they didn't prosper. Right? Read.
The next year, therefore, Salah. Verse 28. The next year, therefore, following, Lysias gathered together 70,000 choice men of foot and 5,000 horsemen, that he might subdue them. So they came into Idumea and pitched their tents at Bethsura, and Judas met them with 10,000 men. And when he saw the mighty army, he prayed and said, Blessed art thou, O Savior of Israel, who didst quell the violence of the mighty man by the hand of thy servant David, and gavest the host of strangers into the hand of Jonathan the son of Saul, and his armor bearer. Shut up this army in the hand of thy people Israel, and let them be confounded in their power and horsemen. Make them to be of no courage, and cause the boldness of their strength to fall away, and let them quake at their destruction. Cast them down with the sword of them that love thee, and let all those that know thy name praise thee with thanksgiving. So they joined battle, and there were slain the host of Lysias about 5,000 men. Even before them were they slain. And when Lysias saw his army put to flight, and the manliness of Judas soldiers, and how they were ready either to live or die valiantly, he went into Antiochia and gathered together a company of strangers. And having made his army greater than it was, he proposed to come again into Judea.
And you know the problem with the problem with these foreign armies, right, that's coming up against the Israelites is this. They're not fighting for anything. You lost, then you're going to get yourself some strangers, right, to just join your army to come against a group of men that are fighting for their first of all, they're fighting for their God, their power. They're fighting for their laws, their culture, their way of life, and their families. You ain't winning that. You ain't winning that. Because these heathens, they're not fighting for anything. So go ahead, read.
Verse 36. Then said Judas and his brethren, behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up to cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary.
You see that? Let us go up to do what?
To cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary.
To cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary. Go ahead.
Upon this, all the hosts assembled themselves together and went up into Mount Sion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate, and the altar profaned, and the gates burned up, and the shrubs growing in the court, as in a forest or in one of the mountains, yea, and the priest chambers pulled down, they rent their clothes and made great lamentation and cast ashes upon their heads.
Right, because they went into the temple, man, and they saw that it was profaned. They went into the court and it wasn't being maintained because it said the shrubs were growing like a forest. You know, it's just something that is so beautiful, destroyed. And see, we can't really comprehend that because we ain't never had a temple. And we you know, we've never seen anything like that. So we can only read about it and try to understand how they felt from there. But, you know, the temple, man, that was a beautiful thing for us. You know, it's like when King David, like when the ark was taken by the Philistines, right? It's like we can't imagine those type of things because we can only read about what it meant to them, right? And so, you know, seeing it, reading it, it don't really give justice to how it felt for them. But go ahead, read.
First Maccabees chapter 4, verse 40. And fell down flat to the ground.
Hey, what's going on in Cleveland, man?
Amber alerts. Man.
Sister Bathia said she got one as well.
It's rough here, man. It's rough. First Maccabees chapter 4, verse 40. And fell down flat to the ground upon their faces, and blew an alarm with the trumpets, and cried towards heaven. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress, until he had cleansed the sanctuary. So he chose priests of the blameless conversations, such as had pleasure in the law, who cleansed the sanctuary and bear out the defiled stones into an unclean place.
Mm-hmm.
And when as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profane, they thought it best to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach to them, because the heathen had defiled it, wherefore they pulled it down, and laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place, until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them.
Go ahead.
Then they took whole stones according to the law, and built a new altar according to the former, and made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple, and hollowed the courts.
Mm-hmm.
They made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick and the altar of burnt offerings and of incense and the table. And upon the altar they burnt incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light in the temple.
Right.
First,
so real quick, because you know this is a teaching that goes around out there, right? There's no mention of them having no oil to light the menorah, and they only had a little bit, and you know it lasted for 8 days and stuff like that. No, there's no mention of that, right? This is a Jewish fable. And you know, we have a 7-branch menorah, not a 9. Now I know when brothers and sisters are decorating and they find decorations, you're mainly going to find decorations with not a 8 or 9 branch menorah. I can't remember, and that's okay, right? You know, it's just important that we understand the true history revolving Hanukkah and the things that really took place, right? So go ahead, pick up where you left off.
First Maccabees chapter 4, verse 51. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table and spread out of the veils and finished all of the works which they had begun to make. Now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betime in the morning
Early
and
enough.
sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made.
Mm-hmm.
Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it. Even in that was it dedicated with songs and citherns and harps and cymbals.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 55. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the Most High of heaven, who had given them good success.
Mm-hmm.
And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days and offered burnt offerings with gladness and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise.
Mm-hmm.
They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed and hanged doors upon them. Thus was there very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. Moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month Caslu, with mirth and gladness.
With mirth and gladness. So, feast dedication is a time, for laughter and joy and feasting and, to think upon the valiant acts of our forefathers and to understand that just like they were delivered then out of the hands of their enemies, just like when we read about Purim, this the same ancient enemy, Haman, with Purim, is Alexander's forefather, direct lineage. And, all these Antiochus and, these so-called Syrians then and Egyptians who were just Greeks, they're all the same people. And they're the same ones that tried to destroy us and commit genocide upon us during Purim. And they did the same thing here in the book of Maccabees, right? And there's even something called the destruction of Nicanor, and we'll deal with that at another time. But again, these same people trying to commit genocide on us and put us to death. And these days come from times of deliverance. That's what they're about. Going back to Passover, we were being delivered, right? Now go to Second Maccabees chapter 1, verse 18.
Second Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 18.
Let me see. Yeah, verse 18.
Therefore, whereas we are now proposed to keep the purification.
Actually, I'm sorry. Read verse 9 first.
The book of Second Maccabees chapter 1 verse 9. And now see that ye keep the feast of tabernacles in the month Caslu.
That it says it like that, and it's going to explain, because some brothers and sisters read this and they may get confused, right? But it says it like that because of what it's about to say in verse 18. So go ahead, read verse 18. I just wanted to make a note of that.
Verse 18, therefore, whereas we are now proposed to keep the purification of the temple upon the 25th day of the month Caslu, we thought it necessary to certify you thereof, that ye might also keep it as the feast of the tabernacles and of the fire, which was given us when Nehemiah offered sacrifice. After that, he had builded the temple and the altar.
Right. So that's why it says that in verse 9. You know, it's not, you're not keeping the tabernacles in the month cast in the 9th month. It clarifies it in verse 18, letting you know that you keep it as tabernacles, meaning tabernacles was an 8-day feast. First and last day are the main feast of it. But tabernacles is a high holy day. And so the first and last day of tabernacles are holy convocations, right? Now with Feast of Dedication, it starts on the first, ends on the 8th. And usually, you know, you try to gather and, you know, celebrate, you know what I'm saying? Get yourself a menorah, light the menorah up. Remember, man, it said, you know, when they came back from war, they sung songs, man. You know, so if there's any time of the year that Israel gonna get together and do some singing and rapping and song, it's this time right here. You know, these feast days, even memorials, right? So that's the Feast of Dedication. That's the understanding of it given unto Daniel. And when you read First and Second Maccabees, as well as the later parts, as well as Daniel 8, right? I mean Daniel 11. Sorry, it sheds light on that Greek captivity our people went through. And when you read about those wars and what was going on with Antiochus Epiphanes and all those, you know, all the players, it's a lot of history, man. And one thing that's not really touched on a lot is how, although he was very, very wicked and he was crafty and he was ambitious and stuff like that, and he was I said earlier that he was very, very persistent in his acts, right? Antiochus Epiphanes, before he died, he realized that he was fighting against a power that he had no chance of winning. Like he recognized that before he died, that man, like he was wrong in his actions towards the Jews, towards the Israelites. Forget exactly where it is in the scriptures, but he realized that before he died. But he died a very, very grievous death. You know, so it's like, hey, just understand that there may be some wicked people, you know, that we deal with, man, that come against us for our culture and things like that. But they know in their heart of hearts that they're fighting against a power that they have no chance of winning. And the Most High gonna bring a grievous death unto these people. But it's up to us to be valiant, right? And to walk accordingly. You know, keep the law and the faith of Christ, right? Because Christ is what's going to bring us that salvation. The law is what's going to help us to be obedient, right? So with that, let me see here. I think there was one question in the email. Yeah, can you go to the book of Isaiah chapter 5, brother? This is only one. Isaiah chapter 5. In verse, you can start at verse 26.
Isaiah chapter 5, verse 26. And he will lift up an ensign to the nations from afar, and will hiss unto them from the ends of the earth, and behold, they shall come with speed swiftly. None shall be weary nor stumble among them. None shall slumber nor sleep. Neither shall the girdle of their loins be loosed, nor the latchet of their shoes be broken. Whose arrows are sharp and all their bows bent. Their horses' hooves shall be counted like flint, and their wheels like a whirlwind. Their roaring shall be like a lion. They shall roar like young lions. Yea, they shall roar and lay hold of the prey, and shall carry it away safe, and none shall deliver it.
Right. So the question was, who is the Lord speaking of, will come and lay hold of the prey? Is this Israel upon the heathen, or the heathen upon Israel? This is dealing with the heathen coming upon Israel. Jump back to verse verse 13.
Isaiah chapter 5, verse 13. Therefore, my people are gone into captivity because they have no knowledge, and their honorable men are famished, and their multitude dried up with thirst. Therefore, hell hath enlarged herself and opened her mouth without measure. And their glory and their multitude and their pomp, and he that rejoiceth shall descend into it. And the mean man shall be brought down, and the mighty man shall be humbled, and the eyes of the lofty shall be humbled. But the Lord of hosts shall be exalted in judgment, and God that is holy shall be sanctified in righteousness. Then shall the lambs feed after their manner, and the waste places of the fat ones shall strangers eat. Woe unto them that draw iniquity with cords of vanity, and stand as it were with a cart rope, that they let him speed and hasten his work, that we may see it, and let the counsel of the Holy One of Israel draw nigh and come.
You can stop right. You can stop right there. But when you read in the book of Isaiah and Jeremiah, they were. This is during the time of the kings, right? And so, this talking about the Assyrians and the Babylonians, what's going to take place to the northern kingdom and to the southern kingdom, right? And so, northern kingdom fell to the Assyrians, and the southern kingdom fell to the Babylonians. And at that time, the Assyrians were a very, very strong empire, to the point that the Most High, and I think we read about this last week, brother. We went to the book of Psalms and some other places. The Assyrians were known as the Lord's sword. They were his sword. And in these latter times, Esau is known as the Assyrian, not because he's Assyrian, but because the Assyrian just means a man of great strength. Like when you read Micah 5, it says the Assyrian is going to enter into the gates, right? But that's Esau, right? That's the bear, the last standing empire of the beast, right? Beast being those 7 major Edomite kingdoms. The bear being the base of it, the last one standing, right? And so that's what it's talking about. The Assyrians and the Babylonians, when you read in Isaiah. Because, Israel, boy, was wicked, man. And the Most High, he had to send us into captivity. Even our righteous men, righteous brothers and sisters, the prophets, right, had to go into captivity. I want you to go to this verse real quick. Let me find it. This is what the Most High said about the wicked this go around. Go to Proverbs 21 and 18.
Proverbs chapter 21.
We'll leave off with this verse right here for brothers and sisters to understand, right? Read.
The wicked shall be a ransom for the righteous, and the transgressor for the upright.
So, hey, brothers and sisters, man, it's imperative, man, that we get into Christ, right? And strengthen our faith in him, who is going to be our ultimate savior through the spirit and power of the Most High. So it's imperative that we stay faithful, right? And like Mattathias said, he said he's not going to go off to the right hand or to the left hand, right? And so I wish everybody, man, a happy Hanukkah, happy Feast of Dedication. Enjoy it. Enjoy these times. that the Most High has given us to celebrate, not only his high holy days, but the feast days. He's given us this time. Enjoy it. Enjoy the brothers, the sisters that are around. Have fun in righteousness. Pray for one another. Pray for, our strength, our resolve. Pray that he allows us to work well with our hands, and that he teaches our hands for war, and that our hands will be sufficient, to protect ourselves and our loved ones in this present time. And pray that he destroys our enemies, because our enemies are lying in wait constantly, not only in a carnal, physical type of way, but they also are lying in wait with craftiness and with, these laws that they write, these policies that they pass, all these different things that they're doing. They're lying in wait for us. But we have a power that ain't stunting none of that, right? We're fighting from victory, not for victory. All right. So with that, I'll say shalom. Most High blessed, Most High in Christ blessed. Most High willing, we'll talk to brothers and sisters next Sabbath.
And if you can, gather with as many like-minded as you can. Come together, enjoy this feast day. Shalom.
Shalom.